Could a single piece of legislation reshape your entire financial future, dramatically altering your paycheck, your cost of living, and even the job market itself? Forget the headlines you thought you knew. A seismic shift is underway, and Washington, D.C. President Donald Trump has just unleashed what he's defiantly calling his One Big Beautiful Bill, an audacious economic blueprint promising to skyrocket America's annual growth rate to an unprecedented 3.1%. But this isn't merely a political proposal. It's a direct, uncompromising challenge to the very foundation of how the U.S. economy works, igniting an explosive, high-stakes showdown in the United States Senate that could either unleash a new era of prosperity or plunge the nation into unprecedented economic turmoil. What are the hidden clauses, the unspoken costs, and the true beneficiaries of this colossal bill? And as the battle lines are drawn in Congress, who will ultimately pay the price if this economic gamble fails? At the heart of the One Big Beautiful Bill lies a promise of unprecedented economic revitalization. The White House is touting it as a generational opportunity to restore America's economic strength, with projections that would send shivers down the spines of his critics and cheers through his base. Key provisions are designed to cut taxes, reduce regulatory burdens, and incentivize domestic production. The president's economic team claims the bill will lead to over $13,000 in increased take-home pay for typical families, with wage hikes potentially exceeding $11,000 for hardworking Americans. Furthermore, the administration projects the creation and saving of over 7 million full-time jobs within the next 4 years, fueled by enhanced small business relief, including a permanent small business deduction and doubled immediate expensing. Incentives for Made in America manufacturing are front and center, aiming to bring jobs and production back to U.S. soil. Beyond these individual and business benefits, the bill also targets support for specific sectors, with provisions for law enforcement, guaranteeing no tax on overtime pay, and rural agriculture, including protection from estate tax on rising real estate values and domestic energy production, aiming to clean out underbrush and nonsense that previously hindered growth. Despite the optimistic projections from the administration, the One Big Beautiful Bill has landed in the Senate like a meteor, immediately sparking fierce debate and revealing deep rifts within both parties. Senate Majority Leader John Thune is pushing hard for a swift passage before the critical 4th of July deadline, acknowledging the bill's sheer size and complexity. However, multiple Republican senators have expressed significant reservations, some openly warning they are not ready to take up the massive legislation. The most contentious element appears to be a proposed overhaul of the Medicaid provider tax, which the nonpartisan Senate parliamentarian has already advised does not adhere to the chamber's procedural rules. This procedural hurdle alone could unravel parts of the bill, forcing Republicans to scramble for revisions or even consider challenging the parliamentarian's authority. Democratic opposition, as expected, is unified and fierce, with Senator Alyssa Stotkin, VMI, warning that the bill threatens to gut basic needs programs like Medicaid and SNAP, and will lead to higher costs for low and moderate income families. The debate isn't just about policy, it's a test of political will, party unity, and the ability of the Trump administration to push through its signature agenda in a Congress that remains deeply divided. This internal Republican struggle, often hidden from the public eye, is a crucial battleground, demonstrating the president's diminishing power to simply demand loyalty and revealing the complex calculations senators must make as they look towards their own re-election campaign. Every dissenting voice amplifies the challenge, potentially weakening the bill before it even sees a full floor vote. The rosy economic forecasts from the White House are meeting head-on with starkly different analyses from independent bodies. The administration's Council of Economic Advisers, C, predicts up to $2.3 trillion in deficit reduction over 10 years, a claim that stands in stark contrast to the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, CBO. The CBO's dynamic analysis of the House-passed version of the bill estimates a potential increase in deficits by $2.8 trillion over the next decade. These conflicting figures highlight the intense ideological battle over economic policy. Proponents of the bill, particularly on the House Ways and Means Committee, argue that extending the 2017 tax cut, the core tenet of this new legislation, is crucial to avoiding a massive tax hike for American families and will fuel a resurgence in GDP growth to 5.2% over the next 4 years. Critics, however, point to past analyses of the 2017 tax law, arguing it did not significantly boost GDP growth, investment, or wages in the pre-pandemic period and primarily exacerbated income inequality, funneling wealth upwards. The integrity of these economic projections will be a central battleground in the Senate debate, as both sides arm themselves with numbers to sway public opinion and legislative votes, with the average American left to decipher which economic vision truly serves their best interests. The data presented by both sides is often framed to support their pre-existing political agendas, creating a confusing landscape for citizens trying to understand the potential impact on their wallets and livelihoods. Beyond the headline economic figure, the One Big Beautiful Bill is a sprawling piece of legislation touching on numerous hot-button issues, making it a true legislative behemoth. For instance, substantial funds are allocated for border security, including completing sections of the border wall and expanding immigrant detention facilities, with standards set at the sole discretion of the Secretary of Homeland Security. This unprecedented power grab has drawn immediate condemnation from immigration advocates and civil liberties groups, who warn of potential human rights abuses and lack of oversight. The bill also proposes dramatic increases in new fees for previously free immigration services, such as applying for asylum, effectively creating a financial barrier to legal entry for many vulnerable individuals seeking refuge. In healthcare, while a rural hospital fund is being debated to offset potential Medicaid cuts, the core changes include new 80-hour-a-month work requirements for Medicaid recipients and a proposed $35 copay per service, raising serious concerns about access to care for vulnerable populations, including the elderly, disabled, and low-income families. Further provisions reportedly aim to streamline federal wildfire capabilities, accelerating domestic drone production for surveillance and disaster response, reforming the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to boost nuclear energy development, and even controversially designating AI data centers as critical defense facilities, potentially giving the government unprecedented access and control over vast amounts of digital information. This vast and seemingly disconnected scope means every senator will find something to champion and something to fiercely oppose, making the path to passage incredibly complex, a legislative Gordian knot. To understand the current debate, we must look back at the origins of many of these proposals in the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, TCJA. The TCJA significantly cut corporate and individual income taxes, a policy championed by the Trump administration as a catalyst for economic boom. Supporters of the new, Big Beautiful Bill point to the positive economic trends that follow the TCJA, arguing that extending and expanding these cuts is essential to maintain America's competitive edge and prevent a looming tax cliff for middle-class families. They claim the 2017 cuts stimulated investment and created jobs, though critics dispute the scale and distribution of these benefits. However, critics vehemently argue that the TCJI largely benefited corporations and the wealthy, ballooned the national debt to unsustainable levels, and did not deliver the promised widespread wage increases or investment surges for the average worker. The new bill's proponents contend that previous CBO estimates underestimated the TCJI's positive impact, while their detractors cite independent studies showing minimal GDP growth and increased income inequality as the primary outcomes. This historical legacy means that Big Beautiful Bill isn't being debated in a vacuum. It's a continuation of a long-standing ideological battle over who benefits from tax policy, how economic growth is truly measured, and how best to stimulate the American economy for all its citizens, not just a select few. The ghosts of past legislation loom large over every clause and every proposed change. With the 4th of July deadline looming, the pressure on Senate Republicans is immense. Can they overcome the internal dissent, address the parliamentarians' objections regarding the Medicaid provider tax, and pass a version of this monumental bill that satisfies the president's demands while appeasing their own constituents and conscience? Or will the sheer scope and contentious nature of the legislation prove too much, leading to a watered-down version, a series of piecemeal reforms, or even a complete, humiliating failure for the administration? The outcome will have profound and lasting implications not just for the U.S. economy and its citizens, but for the political legacy of President Trump's second term, and indeed, for the future trajectory of American governance. Every amendment, every vote, and every behind-the-scenes negotiation will be watched closely, not just by Wall Street and Main Street, but by global power seeking to understand the stability and direction of the world's largest economy. The Big Beautiful Bill isn't just a legislative proposal, it's a political high-wire act, and the entire nation holds its breath, waiting to see if its floors are spectacularly collapsed. Please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to stay updated with the latest breaking stories.